You ever notice how some people start getting uncomfortable the moment you stop giving them chaos? Toxic people can't stand it when you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, when you stop playing the game they created just to control you. The second you choose peace over panic, silence over drama, and boundaries over guilt, they panic. Because now they can't feed off you anymore. They can't twist your emotions or control your mood. You're no longer their supply. And that's the moment they realize their power over you is gone. Silence is your strongest response because it speaks a language toxic people can't manipulate. It's not about ignoring someone out of arrogance or pride. It's about choosing not to engage in a game that was never designed for you to win. When you stay silent, you're not losing the argument, you're ending it. You're removing the fuel that keeps their fire of chaos burning. Toxic people crave reaction. They need your frustration, your explanations, your attempts to defend yourself, because those are the moments they feel powerful. Every time you raise your voice, every time you try to prove your point, you're feeding their control. But when you stop responding, they lose access to that energy, and suddenly the game they were playing doesn't work anymore. Silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It's strength disguised as calm. It's the moment you realize that not every action deserves a reaction, and not every insult needs a defense. The more you argue with someone who thrives on conflict, the more you become part of their performance. Toxic people are masters at turning your reactions into ammunition. They twist your words, exaggerate your tone, and then play the victim to make you look like the villain. But when you stay silent, they have nothing to twist. They have nothing to feed off. You cut their script short, and they're left standing there with no stage to perform on. Silence tells them you've evolved. It shows that you no longer need validation from their chaos. You've learned that peace isn't found in winning arguments. It's found in walking away from them. The person who stays calm in the storm holds the real power, because calmness confuses those who depend on drama. When you respond with silence, you're saying, I don't need to prove my worth to you. You're reclaiming control over your emotions, your peace, and your presence. It's not that you don't care. It's that you care about yourself too much to waste energy on someone who feeds on negativity. There's a kind of power in silence that words can't replicate. Think about how uncomfortable silence makes toxic people. They'll poke, they'll provoke, they'll say things they know are meant to sting because they want to see you break. But when you don't, it unsettles them. They start questioning why you're not reacting. They'll call you cold, heartless, or distant. But what's really happening is they're realizing their influence is gone. You've taken back your emotional control, and to someone who thrives on chaos, that's unbearable. Silence in that moment becomes your declaration of independence. It's saying, you don't control me anymore. The beauty of silence is that it can't be argued with. It doesn't give the other person any material to fight back with. It's untouchable. You can't twist silence into something it's not. And when you choose it intentionally, not out of fear, but out of strength, it becomes one of the most powerful tools you have. It's self-control at its finest. It's maturity. It's the art of knowing when to walk away, not because you've given up, but because you finally understand your worth. Toxic people thrive in noise. They want arguments that drag on, conversations that go in circles, explanations that never end. They want you exhausted, second, guessing yourself, emotionally drained, because that's when they win. But when you stop talking, you stop giving them access to that part of you. You protect your peace by creating space. You start to see that silence isn't passive, it's active self-respect. It's the moment you stop trying to make them understand you, and instead, you start focusing on understanding yourself. There's something incredibly freeing about not reacting. It's like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. When you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, you start to heal. You realize that you don't need to fight every battle to prove your value. Silence lets you observe instead of absorb. You see their patterns more clearly, you recognize the manipulation, and instead of falling for it, you rise above it. That's what silence does. It elevates you. And here's the thing, most people miss: silence doesn't mean you don't feel anything. It means you've learned to manage what you feel without giving it away to people who don't deserve access to it. It's emotional discipline. You're still aware, you're still processing, but you're doing it privately, not performatively. Because once you realize your peace is worth more than their attention, you stop performing for it. You stop trying to prove your calmness through words and start living it through actions. Silence also has a mirror effect. It reflects back to toxic people everything they've been trying to hide. Without your reactions to distract from their behavior, they're forced to confront themselves. They can't use your anger to justify their actions anymore. They can't blame you for the chaos when you're not participating in it. Your silence holds them accountable in a way your words never could. That's why they hate it. That's why they call it disrespectful, dismissive, or cold. Because it exposes them without you having to say a single thing. The truth is, silence is uncomfortable for people who are used to control. They can handle your words because words can be argued with, but silence makes them sit with themselves. It strips away the distraction of drama and forces them to face the reality they've been avoiding. And sometimes, the best revenge you can have is not proving them wrong. It's showing them they no longer matter enough to get a reaction. You start to realize that silence doesn't just protect your peace. It rebuilds it. Every moment you choose not to react, you're teaching yourself emotional independence. You're reminding yourself that you're not responsible for fixing someone else's chaos. You're not responsible for explaining your choices to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. Silence helps you detach from what doesn't serve you, and in that detachment, you find clarity. You begin to see that the only approval you ever needed was your own. In a world where everyone wants the last word, choosing silence is revolutionary. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth, someone who's done explaining, done defending, done entertaining toxicity. It's the voice of someone who understands that peace is louder than any argument, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is absolutely nothing at all. Boundaries expose manipulation, because the moment you start setting limits, you reveal who truly respected you and who only benefited from your lack of them. Toxic people don't get angry because you hurt them. They get angry because you stopped letting them hurt you. When you start saying no, when you start protecting your energy, when you stop answering every text or tolerating every disrespect, they feel it as rejection. But it's not rejection, it's redirection. Boundaries show them what they can no longer get away with, and that's when their true character surfaces. See, boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks that only open for respect. They're not about pushing people away, they're about letting the right people in. But toxic people don't understand that. They see your boundaries as an attack, because for the first time, they're not in control. They can't trip you like before. They can't manipulate you with silence, charm, or shame. You've changed the rules of the game, and that drives them crazy, because now they can't feed off your kindness without accountability. They can't use your empathy as a weakness. Boundaries turn your compassion from something they exploit into something you protect. When you set boundaries, you start to see who was there for connection and who was there for control. The ones who respect you will adjust, They'll listen. They'll understand that healthy relationships have limits. But the toxic ones, they'll test every single one of them. They'll push. They'll provoke. They'll act offended just to see if you'll back down. Because boundaries to them feel like exposure. Your no shines a light on their manipulation. It removes their hiding spots. They can't pretend anymore that they were acting out of love or care when all along it was about power. And here's what's interesting. When you start enforcing boundaries, it's not the big confrontations that reveal the truth. It's the subtle reactions. The sighs, the guilt trips, the "you've changed" comments, the sudden distance when they can't control you like before. That's when you realize how much of the relationship was built on what you allowed, not what they gave. Boundaries don't ruin relationships. They just expose the ones that were fake to begin with. Setting boundaries also changes you. It teaches you that peace comes with a price, and that price is discomfort. Because the first time you say no, your body will shake. You'll feel guilty, selfish, maybe even cruel. That's what happens when you've been conditioned to please everyone but yourself. But that discomfort is growth. It's the sound of your old habits breaking. Every time you uphold a boundary, you teach yourself self-respect. You remind yourself that your time, energy, and emotions are valuable. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for protecting yourself. And eventually, what once felt like guilt starts to feel like relief. Toxic people will always call your boundaries attitude. They'll label your calmness as cold. They'll say you're difficult, selfish, or rude. But that's only because your boundaries stop them from taking advantage of you. The truth is, your boundaries don't offend healthy people. They only offend the ones who benefited from your lack of them. The people who truly care about you will never punish you for prioritizing your peace. They'll respect your space, your limits, and your choices. The ones who don't were never for you. They were for your availability. Boundaries are not about control. They're about clarity. They make it clear what you will and won't tolerate. And that clarity terrifies manipulators because it removes confusion, and confusion is where they thrive. When you know what your lines are, they can't blur them anymore. They can't twist your kindness into compliance. They can't use guilt as a leash. You start to see the pattern every time you say no. You gain freedom. Every time you let something slide, you lose a piece of your peace. The most powerful thing about boundaries is that you don't have to explain them. You don't owe anyone a presentation on why your limits exist. The right people won't need convincing. They'll understand through your consistency. Toxic people, on the other hand, will demand explanations because explanations give them room to argue. That's why enforcing a boundary silently, without justification, is so powerful. You're not trying to make them understand. You're simply showing them the new standard. And as you grow, your boundaries evolve too. You start setting emotional boundaries, no longer letting guilt decide your actions. You set time boundaries, no longer being available at the expense of your own rest. You set mental boundaries, no longer engaging in conversations that drain you. Each one is an act of self-love disguised as discipline. And yes, some people will leave when you start protecting your peace. But that's not loss, that's alignment. You're not pushing them away. You're creating space for people who can meet you where you are. Boundaries don't make you cold. They make you clear. They make you grounded. They remind you that it's okay to outgrow the version of yourself that tolerated too much. You're allowed to disappoint people who had unrealistic access to you. You're allowed to take your energy back. You're allowed to choose yourself without apology. And the moment you do, the manipulation loses its power because it only works on those who feel guilty for choosing peace. Boundaries are your silent declaration of self-worth. They say, I will not shrink myself to fit into your comfort zone. They say, I can love you and still say no. They say, I will not let your chaos define my calm. And that's what toxic people can't handle. The fact that they no longer have permission to control how you feel. They'll call you selfish, dramatic, distant. But what they're really saying is, you've stopped letting me use you. Boundaries don't just protect your peace, they transform it. Because once you set them, you start attracting different energy. You stop connecting from a place of fear and start connecting from a place of confidence. You no longer seek approval, you seek alignment. You no longer chase validation, you choose respect. And that shift, when you finally realize you don't owe anyone access to your peace, that's when the manipulation stops working, and that's when your real freedom begins. Growth threatens their control because every step you take toward becoming a better version of yourself reminds them that they're staying the same. Toxic people don't hate your progress because it's wrong. They hate it because it exposes them. When you start healing, they can no longer play the hero in your story. When you start evolving, they lose the power to define who you are. Growth makes them uncomfortable because it forces them to face the truth. They can't manipulate the new you the way they did the old one. The version of you that questioned everything, that needed their approval, that feared rejection. That version served their control. But growth destroys that dependency. It teaches you to think for yourself, to trust yourself, to value yourself, and that independence is their biggest threat. You'll notice it the moment you start changing. Suddenly, they'll say you've changed too much, or that you're acting different. They'll mock your new habits, your new boundaries, your new peace. They'll say things like, you used to be fun, or you're not the same anymore. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer easy to control, because the moment you step out of the box they built for you, you take away their favorite tool, predictability. Growth makes you unpredictable to someone who depends on your weakness. It makes you harder to manipulate, harder to guilt, trip, harder to drain. And instead of celebrating your progress, they criticize it because deep down, they're afraid of losing their place in your life. Growth exposes the imbalance in a toxic dynamic. When one person evolves and the other refuses to, the relationship can't stay the same. You start wanting deeper conversations, but they still want gossip. You start craving peace, but they still chase chaos. You start prioritizing purpose, but they're still addicted to drama. And when they can't pull you back into that old version of yourself, they'll start doing whatever it takes to make you doubt your growth. They'll minimize your achievements, mock your new mindset, or remind you of your past mistakes just to pull you back down. Because to them, your growth feels like rejection. They take it personally, as if your evolution means they're being left behind. And in a way, they are, because they chose not to move with you. Toxic people thrive in environments where you question your worth. They need you small, uncertain, and dependent, because that's where their control works best. But the moment you start growing, you begin to see through the manipulation. You recognize the patterns. You understand the gaslighting. You no longer take their guilt trips as truth. That awareness breaks their control faster than any confrontation ever could. Growth isn't loud. It's quiet. It's in the way you stop arguing, the way you stop explaining, the way you stop seeking their validation. You outgrow them not by fighting, but by becoming so grounded in your peace that their chaos no longer moves you. What they don't realize is that your growth was never about them. It was about you learning to choose yourself. You learned that not everyone deserves access to you. You learned that healing isn't betrayal, it's self-respect. You learned that peace isn't selfish, it's sacred. But to a toxic person, your healing feels like abandonment because they built their identity around your wounds. They liked you broken because broken people are easier to manage. They could use your insecurities as leverage. But when you start healing, you take that leverage back. You stop apologizing for your progress. You stop dimming your light to make them comfortable. You stop asking for permission to evolve. And that's what drives them crazy. The realization that they no longer have emotional power over someone who's finally found their strength. Growth also shifts the balance of communication. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. You no longer engage in pointless arguments or take the bait when they try to provoke you. You start choosing silence over chaos, reflection over retaliation. That calmness threatens them because it's not something they can control. They can handle your anger because anger is predictable. It gives them something to fight. But peace is disarming. Peace shows them that you're no longer on the same battlefield. And when they realize that, they'll either try to pull you back down or they'll walk away because they can't survive in the environment you're creating. The most uncomfortable thing for toxic people is watching you grow without them. They'll try to downplay your progress by saying it's fake, temporary, or just a phase. They'll point out your flaws, your mistakes, anything to remind you of the person you used to be. But that's just projection. They're not really describing you. They're describing their fear that you'll outgrow their influence. Because when you do, they lose access to your energy, your empathy, and your attention. And without those things, their control fades. That's why they fight your growth so hard. It's not about your improvement, it's about their loss of control. Growth changes the way you see people. You stop viewing everyone as someone to save and start realizing that not everyone wants saving. You stop trying to fix broken relationships that only survive through dysfunction. You stop settling for being understood by people who only listen to respond. Growth teaches you that not everyone can come with you, and that's okay. The higher you go, the smaller your circle gets. Not because you're arrogant, but because peace requires space. And the people who were attached to your pain won't fit into your healing. As you grow, you begin to see that real strength isn't in holding on to everyone. It's in having the courage to let go of what holds you back. Toxic people can't stand that kind of strength because it's silent, it's steady, it's unshakable. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need validation. You no longer seek their approval to feel worthy. You no longer chase their attention to feel seen. You've learned to give yourself everything they withheld from you: respect, love, and acceptance. That's the kind of growth they can't manipulate. And when they realize they can no longer control you, they'll do one last thing. They'll try to convince you that you've become the bad guy. They'll twist your confidence into arrogance, your peace into indifference, your distance into betrayal. But you'll know better. You'll know that growth isn't about becoming harder, it's about becoming clearer. It's about seeing things for what they are, not what you wish they were. And that clarity, the ability to walk away from anything that costs your peace, that's the one thing toxic people can't stand. Because once you tasted peace, chaos stops being entertaining and control stops being effective. Growth turns you into someone who doesn't need their approval anymore. And that's the exact moment you become untouchable. Peace is the power they can't handle because it's the one thing that doesn't play by their rules. Toxic people thrive on tension. They feed on drama, arguments, confusion, and reaction. Chaos is their comfort zone because it keeps everyone emotionally unstable, and when you're unstable, you're easier to control. But peace ruins their script. It takes away their favorite weapon, your emotional response. When you stop reacting, when you stay calm while they try to trigger you, they lose control of the narrative. You become unpredictable, And that unpredictability drives them mad because they can only manipulate what they can disturb, and your peace is the one thing they can't touch. Peace is not passivity. It's not about pretending everything's okay or ignoring what's wrong. It's about choosing not to let everything get inside you. It's the decision to respond with clarity instead of emotion. Toxic people don't understand that kind of strength. They mistake your calm for weakness because they're used to controlling people through chaos. But peace is the quiet confidence that says, you can try to shake me, but I'm not moving. It's the moment you stop trying to prove your point and start protecting your energy. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's steady, grounded, and untouchable. And that stillness exposes them because it highlights how noisy and chaotic they truly are. The truth is, toxic people depend on your reaction to feel powerful. They poke, they provoke, they say things they know will hurt you just to get a rise. Because your reaction tells them they still matter. It tells them they still have influence. But when you stop reacting, when you meet their chaos with calm, they're left facing themselves. They start to crumble because their power was never real, it only existed in your response. Peace shows them that you no longer need to participate in their games to feel worthy. You've outgrown their emotional playground, and that realization terrifies them. Peace is like holding up a mirror. It reflects their behavior back at them without you having to say a word. When you stay calm, their anger looks louder. When you stay kind, their cruelty looks sharper. When you stay grounded, their instability becomes obvious. You don't have to call them out. They expose themselves through contrast. That's the quiet power of peace. It doesn't fight back with words, it wins through composure. It doesn't demand control, it already owns it. And that control over yourself, your emotions, your energy, is something a toxic person can't stand to see because it reminds them of everything they lack. Peace is not built in comfort. It's built in moments when you could explode but choose not to, when you could clap back but walk away, when you could argue, defend, or prove, but instead you breathe, detach, and let silence do the talking. It's restraint. It's maturity. It's realizing that not every storm deserves your attention. And the more peaceful you become, the more chaos tries to test you, because peace threatens every person who depends on dysfunction to feel significant. They'll try to bait you, blame you, even guilt you into reacting. But you start to see that none of it's about you. It's about their need to keep you emotionally entangled. There's a strange kind of strength in peace because it's not performative. It's not about appearing calm for others. It's about being truly unmoved inside. That's what toxic people can't stand, your inner stillness. They'll say things to break it. They'll question your intentions. They'll accuse you of not caring. But the truth is, you care deeply. You just refuse to waste that care where it's not respected. Peace doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you've learned to feel without falling apart. It's emotional discipline. It's you saying, I refuse to live at the mercy of someone else's chaos. When you start prioritizing peace, you naturally lose interest in certain conversations. You stop arguing with people who twist your words. You stop defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop explaining your boundaries to people who ignore them anyway. You stop chasing closure from people who aren't capable of giving it. And as you do, the noise fades. The silence feels strange at first, almost lonely, but then it starts to feel sacred. You realize that peace is not the absence of people, it's the absence of pretending. Peace also changes the kind of energy you attract. When you're no longer reactive, you start connecting with people who value calm, honesty, and respect. You start to see that peace doesn't just protect you, it reshapes your entire environment. Toxic people will either adjust to your calm or remove themselves because your peace disrupts their dysfunction. And when they leave, they'll blame you for being distant or detached. But that's fine. You'll learn that losing people who thrive on conflict is not loss, it's alignment. You're not rejecting them, you're rejecting chaos. Peace takes practice. It's not a switch you flip, it's a boundary you build one situation at a time. The first time you choose not to respond, it will feel unnatural. You'll feel the urge to defend yourself, to speak your truth, to prove your point. But then you'll realize that your peace doesn't depend on being understood. It depends on being steady. And the more you practice staying calm in chaos, the more natural it becomes. You begin to see that the real win isn't in winning the argument. It's in refusing to enter it at all. The irony is that toxic people call you cold or emotionless when you find peace, but they're wrong. You're not emotionless. You're emotionally in control. You've learned to choose peace over panic, silence over shouting, clarity over confusion. You've stopped letting your mood depend on someone else's behavior. That's real power. Because the moment you can stay calm in the face of manipulation, you've broken the chain they used to pull you with. Peace is rebellion to a toxic person because it means they can no longer create storms in your mind. Eventually, you start to understand that peace is not about avoiding difficult people. It's about mastering yourself so deeply that difficult people can't disturb your state. They can talk, provoke, or gossip, but you've learned to stay centered. You've learned that your peace is too expensive to trade for temporary emotions. That's when you become truly untouchable. Because peace doesn't just protect you from toxic people, it confuses them, weakens them, and ultimately exposes them. It's the one energy they can't mimic, the one response they can't predict, and the one power they can never take from you.